Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 148. Hisashi didn't have much to fill him in on about whatever had happened with Midoriya after he'd left for patrol. He said that the talk, quote, went good, I guess, unquote, which meant nothing as far as he was concerned. The kid could get hit by a bus and he'd say he'd had a good day from a hospital bed. He'd seen Shinso talk to Midoriya once or twice in class, and it didn't seem hostile, though it was difficult to tell because he didn't catch a word of the conversation. Plus, Midoriya always seemed kind of scared no matter what was going on, and Shinso always looked kind of pissed no matter what was going on. He'd tried to ask about it over dinner the other night, but all he got was the same prepackaged response of, quote, it's fine, unquote. Regardless of how the talk went, he needed to interview the Shinsos. As much as he was ashamed to admit, he had yet to actually look at the files Tsukachi had sent over. In his defense, there was a lot going on. Even still, putting it off was the main reason he hadn't started it yet. If he were an actual employee being assigned to this case, he would likely have been fired by now. He could hardly admit it to himself, but he didn't want to know what awaited him in those files. He didn't want to know what that kid had been through. He was already so guilty about it. Adding specifics was only going to make it worse. He was being selfish. He knew he was being selfish, but golly, he wasn't wrong. He didn't even make it through the first file on one Hisashi Midoriya before his blood was boiling with rage and shame. The man's life was one charge after the other, a petty criminal from the age of 16 onwards. The first charges were theft and underage drinking. The trend continued to public intoxication and aggravated assault, and those charges must have put up enough red flags for him to get busted for drug possession. None of those were the most concerning details, though. No, what caught Shota's attention was the man's quirk and current status. Hisashi Midoriya, quirk, fire breath, status, deceased. He was found dead from a heroin overdose in Tokyo 4 years ago. Those burns were from his father, weren't they? They were from his own damn father. And the bastard wasn't even alive to pay the consequences. He died right around the same time that Midoriya reported that his mother had left him, and that series of events painted a pretty clear picture. Inko Midoriya was, according to her son, hardly ever home even before she left for good. No report was ever filed for the burns that Izuku received, so Shota presumed that Hisashi had gone into a drug-fueled drunken rage, almost killed his son, fled the scene, and never came back. Inko didn't report anything and waited for him to return, which he apparently did not, seeing as though he died on a bender. Once she was notified of his death, she had no reason left to stay, so she didn't. The last known whereabouts of Inko Midoriya was a flight to China, from which Shota could find no record that she had ever returned. A look at Midoriya's medical file told him that the burns were from a, quote, campfire accident, unquote, which Shota didn't believe for a second. It only strengthened his theory that his father had been the one to cause them. From what little he knew about Hisashi and Inko Midoriya, they did not seem like the type to bring their son camping. Moreover, where the hell were they camping in the middle of the city? The report was from Mustafa Central Hospital, for crimey's sake. Midoriya didn't even know his father was dead. God, he was going to have to tell him. He felt sick. There wasn't much he could do with an international investigation, and there was nothing he could do about a perpetrator who was already dead. Golly frickin' damn it, he sighed to himself and scrubbed at his face. "You all right, Sho?" Zashi asked from the other side of the table. "Hisashi Midoriya is dead. He had a fire quirk as well as a drug problem, and Inko Midoriya seems to have fled the country." He signed his answer succinctly, letting Hisashi draw his own conclusions. The kid was one closed door away, and he didn't want him overhearing this. His husband quickly mirrored his posture, elbows propped on the table, shoulders slumped, and his head in his hands. "Izuku doesn't know he's dead," he added quietly, realizing too late that he had used Midoriya's given name. It felt wrong to call him Midoriya now that he had a better understanding of what they had done to him. "Yeah, okay. I'd say, golly frickin' damn it, is a fair assessment of the situation," Hisashi remarked without humor. They sat in silence for a long while before Hisashi spoke up again. "We should just tell him. There's never going to be a good time for it, and if we keep waiting around trying to find one, it's only going to get worse and worse when he realizes how long we've been keeping the information from him. He's on good," their voice tilted upwards, making it sound like good was a question more than it was a statement, "terms with Shinso now, right? He's got someone to talk to about dead dads, even if it's not the same kind of grief," which is, of course, assuming that he even cares if the bastard is dead or alive. He made it seem like there was no love lost when he talked about him in the hospital after the USJ. Zashi switched over to signing mid-response, knowing full well he had a skewed perception of how loudly he was speaking. He's going to connect the dots on the timeline and realize that Inko only stuck around until she was sure he wasn't coming back. Whether or not he cares if he's dead, he's going to care about that, Shota pointed out. Hisashi thought on that for a moment before asserting that their opinion hadn't changed. They needed to tell him as soon as possible. Shota reluctantly agreed. It wouldn't do anyone involved any good drawing it out. The conversation petered out. He went back to reviewing the files Tsukashi had sent over when his eye caught on another detail. "Oh, damn it," he cursed again. "What?" Hisashi questioned the outburst. "His birthday is next week," he explained. Hisashi shoved his hands to his face again and let out a groan. "Wonderful. That's great. Yeah, happy birthday, kiddo. Your dad is dead," they said with a sarcastic cheer which was muffled by their hands still over their face. "Well, yes, I agree. That's not great timing, but like you said, it never will be. I meant that I had wanted to do something for his birthday. I doubt he's ever had a proper celebration. He said something about it at the station." Zashi looked up at him with that insufferable, adoring smile he wore whenever Shota did something thoughtful, the one that had him seriously considering making a concerted effort to not be thoughtful. He rolled his eyes and hid behind taking a sip from his coffee. "That's so sweet, Sho," they cooed. "Shut up," he deadpanned. "No, it is. What did you have in mind?" they asked excitedly. "I figured he probably doesn't want to spend any more time with us than he already is." Hisashi frowned at that, but didn't disagree. "I need to interview the Shinsos for the case, and afterward, maybe I could ask if they'd be willing to host. We could have his friends get together there, something small. He wouldn't want a big fuss. He probably wouldn't even want this much of a fuss." Hisashi was smiling at him again. "Would you wipe that grin off your face? It's unsettling," he snipped. "No, I will not." They dismissed the request immediately. "That sounds lovely, though. I think you're right about the fuss. He might not appreciate it at first, but we need to give this kid some good memories." He rolled his eyes at the stupid smile still on their face, but he didn't disagree. He did, however, grab the spiral notebook he was about to start writing notes in, as well as the files, and stood to leave. He needed to get out of here and clear his head, and if he was going on a walk, he may as well have a destination in mind. The Shinsos residence was about a 45-minute walk from here, which would give him enough time to make a mental list of interview questions. He'd procrastinated long enough. The Band-Aid needed to be ripped off. It was time to get to work. No, come on, Sho, where are you going? Hisashi complained. Shinsos, he answered succinctly. What? Shouldn't you schedule that? What if they're not home? Then I end up going on a walk for no reason. Worse things have happened. He snipped back more testily than he had intended. Hisashi must have understood what he needed. They always understood what he needed. They didn't prod him further or try to stop him. They just nodded and let him go. They would talk about all of this when he got back. Walks always helped him clear his mind. Being aware of his surroundings in public was hardwired into his brain, so it made it more difficult to spiral when he was already half occupied. He still had to put his train of thought back onto the rails pretty frequently because it kept returning to the fact that Hisashi Midoriya was dead and he would never get the chance to wring his damn neck. Part of him wished that some other person gave Izuku those burns so that he could... No, you're a hero, Shota. Pull yourself together. He ended up having to do a few laps around the neighborhood to get his thoughts together enough to conduct an interview. By the time he was done seething with rage, it was getting dangerously close to a reasonable dinner time, and he remembered what happened last time he had been here at a reasonable dinner time. He would like to not be force-fed today, so he quickly made his way to the Shinsos. He knocked on the door and took a few steps back. He was beginning to think that no one was going to answer when the door finally swung open and Shinso stood there with the same face he could imagine a kid caught with their hand in the cookie jar would make. Ah, yes, home visits from a teacher were usually not good. Was he doing something he ought to get in trouble for? He raised a brow, half in question, and half just to tease the poor kid. Aizawa-sensei, what, why are... He trailed off, likely realizing that there wasn't a polite way to ask, what the hell are you doing at my house? Is your mother home? Yes, yes. Why? I have some questions about her interactions with Midoriya before UA. Is this a bad time? Oh, no, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure she's just reading. I'll go... Come in, actually. Yeah, I'll go get her. He awkwardly invited him into the Genkan before bolting up the stairs. He could hear hushed conversation, but he couldn't make out any words. It didn't take long for Shinso-san to make her way to the top of the stairs. Aizawa-san, hello. Toshi said... Here, she cut herself off to pull a pair of guest slippers from the closet at the end of the stairs. Toshi said you had questions about Midoriya? Yes, thank you. You're not under investigation. I'm just getting as much information as I can without forcing it out of him. He attempted to ease her obvious tension. It did not work. All right. Would you like tea or water? Or water would be nice. Thank you, Shinso-san. He cut her off before she could offer anything else. Of course. Follow me. We can sit at the dining table or the living room, whichever you prefer, she said as she led him down the hall and gestured in the direction of both options. He took the same chair at the dining table that he had the last time he was here. How is he? Well, he wasn't doing great last I saw him, she asked before he even got the chance to set his things on the table. He hadn't been worried about her, but the immediate reassurance that she was not part of the problem was nice anyway. She looked a little haggard. She had bags under her eyes that told him she probably hadn't had a good night's sleep since she'd last seen Izuku. She really did care about him. He wondered how he had evaded her concern for so long. That kid was far too cunning for his own good. He's healing, he said, because he didn't know how else to answer that. He didn't really know how he was doing. He didn't talk to them. That's good. Yeah. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. She cut herself off as her voice filled with too much emotion. She shook her head and dismissed whatever she was thinking about as she set a cup of water down for him and took a seat across the table. You had questions, she prompted. She looked about ready to cry, and they hadn't even started. This was going to be a long interview, wasn't it? He'd been too busy thinking about questions to mentally prepare himself for tears, but it was too late now. When and how did you meet Midoriya? It was about 4 years ago now. He came into the library right at opening and just kept showing up. She sniffled, but her voice was steady when she answered. Did you notice anything odd about him during that time? Shinsos-san bit her lip and continued to wrestle with the tears she was trying very hard not to shed. Yes, there were several concerning things that I noted over the time I knew him, she admitted. Things such as... She let out a humorless laugh, and a few tears fell down her cheeks despite her best efforts. He was scared all the time. He was always so scared. She covered her mouth as a quiet sob forced its way up her throat, but only one. As soon as the broken sound left her mouth, she stilled. The grief and guilt on her face vanished, and she dabbed away any tears left on her cheeks. Her expression was neutral when she turned back to Shota. The process took less than 30 seconds, and it reminded him all too much of Izuku, how he could pack away his feelings on the turn of a dime. I'm sorry. She apologized and paused for a moment. My quirk lets me feel other people's emotions. I can't turn it off. It also allows me to control them, my own included. It doesn't help anyone if I'm a blubbering mess through this. Shinso-san explained. That made sense. It felt a bit invasive to know that she was reading him so intimately, but he squashed that down as best he could because he knew she could probably feel that too. Whether or not she knew what he was thinking, she kept her reaction off her face. Understood. Please continue, he prompted after a moment of tense silence. Midoriya was very good at concealing his emotions, better than anyone I have ever met. Most people are an open book to me, but he wasn't. He still isn't. Most of the time, the only emotion he let slip out was fear. I didn't know how to broach the topic, so I didn't. I kept an eye on him as best I could because there wasn't anything I could really report. He came in with a black eye once, but Toshi said he got it at school. There was another incident, which I didn't witness, where he came into the library sick and told Toshi that he had to send a fake email from his mother to get out of school. But he was gone before Hitoshi could alert me. He was MIA for a week after that, and when he came back, I asked him if he was safe at home. He said he was, but his parents were rarely there. Of course, rarely was generous, seeing as though they were never home. There was no home in the first place. She trailed off, and her eyes went glassy for a moment before she steeled herself again. Sorry. He told us that a family friend checks in on him regularly, and we believed him, so we let it be. She must have felt his guilt, followed by fear, followed by desperately trying to shove both of those feelings down, because she paused and looked back up at him with a crease in her brow. Did he actually have someone? I don't. Sorry, you aren't obligated to tell me anything. I apologize. No, it's all right. I understand, he admitted. He knew how awful she must feel about this. He knew far too well how hard she must be kicking herself, and now she knew how much he understood that. Damn it. How the hell did Izuku hide from her so effectively when Shota could barely get through a conversation? He internally sighed for all the good that did in hiding anything from her. and decided she deserved some form of the truth, if only to make her feel a little better. Yes, he did have someone. She eyed him warily, likely both feeling and hearing the disappointment laced into that paltry reassurance. Someone good? She pressed warily. Shota bit the inside of his cheek. He didn't know how much she could feel from him, nor how much she could extrapolate from those feelings, but he knew that if he lied to her, he would most certainly get caught up in it somewhere down the road. So he settled for another partial truth. Not good enough. He didn't know how to read her expression. He supposed there was no expression to be read if she was suppressing her own emotions. Dwelling on it wasn't helping, so he moved on. There is an incident report on his file that lists you as the person whose care he was turned over to, an attack which also involved your son. He pivoted the conversation away from himself. Yes, someone tried to mug them while they were walking home. They were fine, but Midoriya claimed his parents were out of the country, so the officer let him go with me rather than holding him until they could reach his parents. He stayed the night here and told me the family friend would be seeing him the night after so he wouldn't be alone. He clenched his jaw and steadfastly looked at his notes as he jotted down her response. Is there anything else you could think of that may help the investigation? She looked down at the table and started worrying at her lip as she thought, so he waited. This family friend, have you spoken with them? I don't know much about them, but Midoriya talked about them minimally. We have already spoken to them, Shinsos-san. He cut her off, selfishly not wanting to hear what she had to say. He was glad to know she hadn't sussed out that it was him they were talking about, but he didn't need to hear any more about his own shortcomings. All right, she answered reluctantly, obviously wanting to ask more. He was about to start the closing remarks of the interview when she sat up straight and spoke as if she had just remembered something. Oh, he had stitches once in his leg. He told us he fell off a dumpster when it happened, but now I doubt that's the truth. I don't know how he managed to get stitches without raising suspicion. Well, I guess I don't even know that he even actually had stitches. I never saw the injury. Huh. Well, that's one answer he had. He knew full well how he had managed to get stitches for his legs without dealing with the hospital and their prying questions. All right, when was this? He asked, even though he was pretty sure he already knew the answer. Sometime in the summer last year. I think it was toward the end of break for Toshi. So probably late August? Yeah, he figured that was it. He did, in fact, have stitches, ones that he gave himself on a rooftop. Shinso-san didn't need to know the details on that. Got it. Anything else? He gave her a moment to think before he spoke again. You can call me if you remember anything of import, he reassured when she didn't have anything to add. Thank you. Toshi's got your number. It's all right if I contact you that way? Yes, that would be preferred. He trailed off. Now would be generally the time that he would dismiss himself, but he had more to say, and he was unsure how to pivot the conversation from interrogation to something more akin to a parent-teacher conference. Did you have another question, Aizawa-san? Shinso-san saved him from his own floundering. Yes, though it's not to do with the investigation. How did the conversation over the weekend go? I know they stayed after school together on Monday, but Midoriya doesn't talk to us very much. Shota could see that she had caught each little slip-up he fumbled over in that statement, namely almost calling him Izuku and referring to an us. Izuku had told him that he had not brought up Hisashi, likely because he knew that their relationship was a fairly well-kept secret. No one besides their minimal friends and Hisashi's family even knew he was married. Graciously, she didn't bring it up. It was a lot, but I think it went as well as it could have gone. They're on good terms then? He asked to clarify. I would say so. There's obviously still a lot to sort through, but Toshi at least wants to be friends again, and I don't doubt that Midoriya wants the same. Good. That was good, because he really didn't have a backup plan. Midoriya's birthday is this coming Saturday. I don't think he has ever celebrated it, and I sincerely doubt he wants to spend it with me. I know it's an imposition, but I was hoping you would be willing to host something, he explained awkwardly. She was giving him another version of that damn smile Hizashi gave him. Was it really so hard to believe he did nice things? Why did it always elicit that face? Yes, I would love to. Yes, of course, she replied once her voice caught up to her thoughts. Did you have something in mind? Nothing extravagant. Just a few classmates, assuming that Shinso-kun is also amenable. I don't know his opinions on his peers. Do you want me to call him in here? We could just ask him, she offered. He bit the inside of his cheek and tried his best not to be envious of how easily she could talk to her son when talking to Izuku felt like pulling teeth half the time. Yes, that's probably a good idea. All right, I'm going to shout for him, she warned before turning toward the hallway and yelling, Toshi! Golly, if he did that to Izuku, he'd probably end up taking the poor kid to the hospital for a heart attack. He'd been with them for a month now, and things were certainly better than they were at the beginning, but that wasn't exactly a high bar to clear. He heard Shinso's footsteps thumping down the stairs in short order, and he had to bite his tongue to prevent a comment about his audible footfalls slipping out. He wasn't his teacher right now. He stayed quiet as Shinso-san explained the situation, and the little traitor made the same damn face that his mother did, albeit more subdued. Yeah, that sounds good. I sat with him and his friends during lunch a few times. They seem nice, Shinso answered hesitantly. He wasn't sure if the hesitance was because he was lying or social anxiety, but he was leaning toward the latter. He couldn't imagine what issues Shinso would have with them. They were agreeable, loud, but agreeable. How many friends are we talking? Shinso-san asked warily, seeming to have picked up on the social anxiety radiating off of her son. 3. He and Shinso replied at the same time. Oh, that's perfect. It'll be fun, Toshi. It's not like they're strangers anyway. One's Todoroki, right? You mentioned him after... Shinso-san trailed off. He could imagine when the topic of Todoroki being friends with Izuku came up, so he didn't ask. Yes, Todoroki, Ida, and Uraraka, he confirmed. Do I know them? They were in the sports festival, right? Shinso-san asked no one in particular. Yeah, Uraraka is the girl with the gravity quirk, and Ida's Ingenium's little brother. They were both in the final round, Shinso answered. Ah, I can picture them. Shinso-san replied with a morose undertone. What was that about? Probably Ingenium. He'd been big news a couple of weeks back. He dismissed the thought readily, one problem at a time. I know his favorite food, but we just had it when he was last over. Favorite food? He interrupted. Oh, yeah, he likes katsudon, though I don't know if that's his favorite or if it's just the only home-cooked meal he'd had up until that point. She trailed off morosely. He remembered the time Ivy had insisted on bringing dinner for him instead of the other way around. It had been katsudon. He made him his favorite food. That was heartbreakingly adorable. No, that sounds right. He said something about katsudon before. He replied in a forced, level tone. Anyway, you don't happen to know his sweets preferences, do you? Shinso-san asked hopefully. Ah, this one he did know. Strawberry. He likes strawberry-flavored things. Oh, that'll be good. Is there anything he needs? Something we could get as a gift? She asked. I can get him anything he needs. If you're going to get him something he wants. I don't think he'll be big on gifts or any of this, really. It will probably make him uncomfortable, but I want him to have a normal experience for once. She was smiling at him again. He fought back the urge to sigh. As for what he wants, Shinso-kun probably has a better idea of that than I do, he admitted. It's not like he could say he's got a thing for illegal knife collecting. That probably wouldn't go over well. Oh, he likes to draw and write a lot. Maybe a notebook or sketchbook and some nice pencils. He likes heroes too. I don't think I've ever seen any merch. Oh! He cut himself off as if he had just remembered something upsetting. Shota raised an eyebrow in silent question. The first thing he did at the library before we even started talking was look into how much old All Might merch sold for. He probably sold his stuff online. Shinso-kun trailed off. Of course, it was All Might merch. It had to be All Might, didn't it? He did his best to not let his annoyance show, but the little smirk on Shinso-san's face told him that his opinion didn't go unnoticed. I'll talk to All Might. I'm sure he can get something more interesting than random trinkets from the store. He reluctantly volunteered. Shinso-kun, if you could be the one to invite the others, I would appreciate that. I don't think Midoriya would want the class to know that he's living with me now, and I imagine that if I tell Midoriya our plans, he will spend the entire week stressing out about it. He less than reluctantly voluntold. Yeah, I can do that, Shinso-kun confirmed with the expected amount of enthusiasm. Good. Shinso-san, could I interview Shinso-kun now? He pivoted back and asked, as it would be illegal to do so without her express permission, seeing as though he was a minor. Oh, she trailed off and looked to her son, waiting for him to nod, before she continued, Yes, I'll be upstairs? She said in a way that implied it was more of a question than a statement. Shota, in turn, did the same, looking at Shinso-kun and waiting for him to nod before he replied, Yes, I will let you know if we need you for anything. Thank you. Shinso took the seat that his mother had vacated, and he waited until he heard a door latch upstairs before he started. When and how did you first meet Midoriya? He came into the library my mom works at around 4 years ago, and eventually we started talking. He gave the expected response. Did you notice anything odd about him during that time? Yeah, he was pretty weird. I mean, it's weird for anyone to show up at the library that early and that consistently, especially kids. What kid wants to spend all their time at the library? He was always researching something. Like I said at first, he was probably selling his All Might merch to get by, but he also looked up how to repair a bunch of things, as well as martial arts training stuff, which makes more sense in context, I suppose. All right. Anything else? Not just initial observations, anything you can think of during the entire time you knew him. He clarified. Probably not anything my mom didn't already say. He had a black eye once, but I think he got it at school, though now I'm not so sure. That was around the time when he first started coming in. Then there was the time he was sick and had to send a fake email to get out of school. And then another time, he said he had stitches in his leg. He told me the other day it was because he had been stabbed. Don't tell my mom that. She doesn't need to know what actually happened. He told us he fell off a dumpster. He continued. Yes, what she didn't know couldn't hurt her. He was well aware of that when it came to Midoriya's situation. It was very kind of him to think to spare her that heartache. I understand. I won't tell her, he assured, though this situation isn't just difficult for Midoriya, and the pool of people you can talk to about it is limited. I won't push you one way or the other, but I will say I'm not a great conversationalist. Of course, you can still talk to me if you'd like to. Shinso smiled at the mildly self-deprecating jab, though it looked a little more like a grimace. Is he all right? Well, no, obviously not. That's a stupid question. He's doing better, and I don't doubt that the trend will continue. Shota cut off his fumbling. He could see the same awful look of guilt weighing down the kid's shoulders that he held on his own. He didn't think there was much he could say to change that, but he felt like he should try at least. You were also a child, Shinso. You couldn't be expected to notice what the adults in his life didn't, he stated firmly. As he had expected, Shinso didn't look convinced. He was my best friend. I should have noticed. I did notice. I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't do anything. You did plenty. Being there for him was more than anyone else had done for him, he argued, though the words felt empty. Wasn't enough. Shinso insisted under his breath. It all felt too much like he was talking to himself. You aren't the one who abandoned him, nor are you the one who made him feel like he couldn't ask for help. His parents are to blame, not you. He forced the words out, even though it felt like they burned his tongue. His insistence only seemed to make Shinso angry, and Shota couldn't blame him. If someone tried to tell him that, he would be hard-pressed not to snap at them. Their situations were different, though. Shota was an adult. He was a hero, for crying out loud. He should have known better. I think that's enough for now. Please let me know if you remember anything that you might... Please let me know if you remember anything that you think might be of import. He concluded the interview for both of their sakes. Or if you just need to talk, he added. Shinso looked down at the table and worried at his lip the exact same way his mother had not 20 minutes prior. Again, Shota waited for him to speak. He said there were a lot of things he couldn't tell us for our safety. I don't really know what he meant by that. Is he in trouble? Shinso cringed as he spoke. Shota studied him for a minute. He looked genuinely fearful that Midoriya was going to get caught for something. He trusted the kid. He really did. But he couldn't answer that. Knowledge was dangerous whether the wielder intended to use it as a weapon or not. I cannot answer that, and I trust you to keep these concerns to yourself. Rumors like that will ruin his reputation before he even gets a chance to establish it. He warned a little more forcefully than he needed to. Yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry. Shinso fumbled out an anxious reply. I didn't intend for that to be a scolding. I just need you to understand the severity of the situation. He backtracked. I do, or I don't, because I don't know what happened. Not that I need to. Sorry. Yes, I understand. Shinso answered, sounding thoroughly scolded despite his attempt at reassurance. He didn't think that repeating himself would make any difference, so he didn't bother. He just stood and took his leave. Shinso-san met them at the door, and he narrowly avoided a dinner invitation on his way out. They meant well. They were good people. He hoped that Izuku could find a soft place to land with them. End of chapter.